must equal the flow out of a node for each node. And then of course we have a flow constraint for link, that the flow through that link has to be lower or equal to its capacity. So here of course we can use a bound for these variables. So we just for the variables, but now instead of we have basically constraints for the link. So we actually have a lot more. So how many constraints actually would we need to select a maximum flow LP model for this problem? So how many constraints do we need for a smaller model with a programming problem? I'll start a timer. Correct answer is 19. So, of course, in this case, I include because next to the nodes, which have to have, of course, a total sum of flow of a net flow of 0, we also have to have a constraint per link. So we have 7 nodes, we have 12 links, so that means we need 19 constraints. Of course, if we use bounds, then we have to use bounds instead of a constraint. But basically, in this case, we need 19 constraints. Well, of course, we still just have only the flow through as variables, so we still just have 12 variables, so nothing's changed there. So we have 9 to 12 variables and 19 constraints. So if we wanted to solve this in Excel, what would that look like? So in this case, the top is still basically our transshipment. You see, in this case, actually, what I've done is I've added the flow into node O and the flow out of node X. So I've actually added 2 extra variables, and because of that, O and T are now transshipment nodes, so I can treat them exactly the same way. So I prefer this about having an alternative flow, but you can do whatever you want. So otherwise, you'd have to basically release these and give them a certain value. And also, if you use a solver, then it does, because this will actually is a variable, this will get a direct number, so you can actually already immediately see what the flow is without having to look up through your network. So here, of course, we have all the links listed, and each link has a capacity limit. And here you can see we've already solved it. Total flow is 14, and here you can basically see the flow through each node. And one thing to note here already is that you see that a couple of links are fully loaded, and some of them are not. Some of them are actually not used at all. So if we look into an LP if we look at actually a simplex method to solve this, we cannot simply say, okay, all the nodes in the flow are actually basic, they're non-basic, 0, because we actually have 2 non-basics, but that's cool, which we'll discuss more in a moment. So if we now create an LP file out of this, also want to create a linear programming model, again we get all the constraints. In this case, indeed, you see, instead of adding a bunch of constraints here, I basically created bounds for these variables, which are limited to the maximum of the flow. And in this case, we have a very simple objective, simply saying, okay, I want to maximize flow of x0, so basically the flow into node 0, and of course the node for Tx should actually be the same. And if here you see basically the result which we get with the flow for each node. So in this case, we can just use the solver, throw it in, and get the answer. There is actually another way to do it, which is the augmenting path algorithm. And that basically allows us, well, first of all, to create maximum flow a bit faster. Actually, if you have a good solver, it will already apply the augmenting path algorithm without you seeing it. So it's basically, again, a usage of the special application of the simplex method. And what we see here is basically, on the bottom right here, you also see a table, which again, actually disappears like this. Let me just shift this off. Let's take back. And the table is actually a nicer representation because it's easier than continuously scratch. So here again, I have an animation. So what do we do for the automatic path algorithm? Well, what we have to do is we have to define all the paths which define the maximum flow, right? So we start off with, which is basically which we think is the maximum capacity path. So in this case, we start with O, B, E, T. So for each node, we simply take the maximum capacity length. So in this case here, would be the maximum capacity here, 5, and then 6 to T. Well, we have now this path, O, B, E, T. Now, what is the maximum flow we can get through this path? Well, in this case, BE is the most limiting, so here we have a capacity of 5. So we can actually allocate a flow of 5 throughout this path. So we do that. OBET is 5. As you see here, also in the table at the same time, I've now actually taken from OB, I've taken a value of 5, so this was 7, this is now 2. I've actually moved 5 to the other side. This is actually bookkeeping to make sure if you do reverse the flow, you don't go over the maximum, over the minimum. We actually have a flow 5 going through B. From B, in this case, doing on to E, which is now fully committed. Now here, simply have to use my net more, so we have flow going from O to B with 5. Here this is now 0, 5, and you see actually now on the other side we have 5 here, and actually this way we go all through this route. Yeah. So also if you look at the network, it gives the same information. So we still have 2 remaining flow in this direction, 0 in this direction, and 1 remaining in this direction. Okay, now what is the next path? Well, the next capacity is actually from O to A, which has a capacity of 5, then AD, and then DT. So our next path is OA, AD, DT. And now if we look, we have capacity of 5, capacity of 3, capacity of 9. So 3 is actually the most limiting link on this path. So so that's actually the let's say our value. So OADT, well again we transship it, so now we still have 2 remaining here, but we can also actually reverse it by 3. So this 3 actually means we could also have a reverse flow in this direction of 3, so we could reduce the flow by 3 or increase it by 2. In this case we could increase the flow by 0 or reduce it by 3. And in this case we could increase it even by 6 or reduce it by 3. And in the bottom right you see the same information but in a tableau format, which is actually easier if you do the homework to use a tableau, and it's much easier to copy paste in the network all the time. Okay, so now we have a total flow of 8. Okay, now what's the next path? Well, OC, CE, and then well, it can go ED or ET. Well, ET is shorter, so I think it is OCET. OBDT is actually the one I chose. Okay, so we have flow OBDT. It doesn't really matter what order you do them in. Eventually, you'll end up with the maximum flow at one point. In this case, we went from OBDT, flow 2, so we have 2 remaining. So we have 2 remaining here, 4 here, 6 here. So OUBT basically has a maximum amount of about 2, which we can allocate to it. So again, we adapt the values, and now we have a flow of 10. So we keep track of the paths we actually put in. So, well, the next one I think then that doesn't need the OCET. Yeah, it is. So OCET, but you see that has a maximum capacity of 1, so that's 1 I took actually later. So OCET, so again, added 1 to this side, removed 1 to this side, and now this link is fully utilized, this link is full, we can't kind of add extra additional capacity there. Okay, now the next path, OABDT, so we still have some capacity latent here, so if we add a flow here, OABDT, AB has capacity 1, so we can only add 1 here, so basically we do that. So here, and then basically we go from 11 to 12. Out here, let's use the arrows, it's more accurate than the mouse wheel. So, well, where else can we add a flow? OCEBT. OCEBT, so here you can also see we added this path, which also adds 1 flow. Well, and is there any additional path? Well, I think there's still one more path we can add something to, which I think is OCEBDT. And there's something fascinating about it. So if you look at OCEBDT, what we're actually doing is that we're reversing the flow. So we had a flow from B to E, which was let's say 5, but now actually we're reversing that flow by 1. And that way we can actually also fill up the capacity from B to D, which still has 1 remaining. So from B to D, we now have a flow of 1. So actually by taking this path, we can still add 1 to the flow, but we actually now, from B to E, we actually have 5 going in one direction and 1 going to another direction. Well, you can see now, basically, if we now take a cut, in this case, this is the cut, we see that there's no additional capacity remaining over this cut. So we know we're now at our maximum flow. So we know now that the maximum flow for T. We already knew that because we solved the Lipton L2 formulation before. So it's good to check it twice, so now you know if we did the correct answer. Okay, but now basically we have this reverse flow, which is not something we quite want. So in this case, what you see here is that actually we have a positive flow. So actually, the nice thing you can do about this is that each of these paths we've determined is actually a variable within our network. That each of these paths goes over a number of links. So O, B, E, T. So each of these paths is now a variable. Each of these links is a constraint. And each of these, of course, utilize a function of one of the links it goes through. And we basically go throughout the network. The only nasty one thing is this actually is the only one with a coefficient of -1, which is not very nice. So instead of having the full 12 variables, we now actually have a maximum flow, in this case with only 5, so we have fewer variables. And the reason why we might want to do this is, later on we'll talk a bit about multi-commodity flows, is that we have now the maximum for a single flow, but if we now have multiple flows throughout the network, then these are the only 5 variables for this particular flow, so we can actually reduce our total problem size this way. But if the total capacity doesn't change, we add an additional flow, we can take the maximum flow for each individual flow, and then if we can balance these flows with only these 5, only these 7 variables instead of the full 12. So what we actually said is what we can actually have to do in this case is because we have the return flow and we want to get rid of it because it's a -1 in our table. And actually what this has is, well, we basically have the path OCEBDT and we have the path OBET. Well, basically these are the same as having a single path OBDT and a path OCET. So what we can actually do is that we have basically this flow we actually I think have 4 of, these we have 1 of, but by actually taking these out, one of these out, and actually adding these 2, we can actually eliminate that return flow, and now we just only have a positive flow over this one. So by basically adding up these flows, we can actually, now we get this, and actually we actually eliminated 1 path in this way. So actually this path is now eliminated. We have 1 of these paths left, and actually we added onto these already existing path 1 flow, and we actually now get this model. So we now get the same one, but now actually we're only 6 paths. Yes, is that clear? Okay, so now with 6 paths, and now we actually have a reduced problem with 6 different paths which we can allocate to. And also, if we change some of the variables, we can simply see what the change in flow is. But of course, we have to be careful that we don't suddenly get that our cut is still actually limiting. So we still need to revisit that if we do actually change the model. But if we have a fixed path model with multiple flows, and then for this flow, this gives us the maximum. And it's always the sum of the individual paths and how much we allocate to each of these paths. Also something we can actually add is the upper bound technique. And basically, it basically allows us to reduce the number of constraints. And it basically, when I talked about the bounds, it's similar to that. And actually what it basically means is we don't need to add any surplus for slack constraints. And the most useful application is if we have a capacity limit on the links. also something the LP solver uses. So instead of actually having circles or slack constraints, we simply use the U upper bound technique. And what we do there is that we replace a basic xi with a non-basic yi. And actually what we do is that if we have a full, if the flow is used at full capacity, then it would be basic, but we cannot allow it to be basic because we're limited on the number of basic constraints. So what we can actually do is replace it with a reverse flow, which is then 0, which is non-basic. So we can actually replace a basic flow with a non-basic flow. So a fully utilized flow, we cannot add any more to that. So now if we actually take the reverse flow, we can actually reverse the flow, so that is still a non-basic, so it has a value of 0, and that way we can basically create that. And that basically allows us to use the so-called upper bound technique, and that will actually, and we'll use that when we talk to you in a minute, when we talk about the the network flow problem. So in this case, if we have a flow available, here. So for example, if I have a flow between L and U, what we can do is simply say, okay, we know our L is more equal to HU, and our X and Y has to be more equal to UY. So now if we now replace XY with UI minus LI minus YI, now we only basically end up with that YI has to be larger or equal to LY. So this way we can actually reduce our problem and we don't need any slack variables. So if we look, for example, for the window problem, this is our objective, and this is our constraint. Now instead of actually having a upper bound or a constraint for x1 and constraint for x2, we now actually add a lower and upper bound for x1 and x2. Now for x2, we actually replace x2 by 6 minus y2. We were also replacing our objective values, so z is 3x1 plus 30, so 5 times x2, so that's 5 times 6 minus 5y2. And in this case, 3x1 plus 6 is this value, 2 times 12 minus 2y2 is more or equal to xy. And if we then replace x1 with 2 minus y1, and basically we get z is 36 minus 5y2 minus 3y1, and you can actually see here we get our optimum solution. Yeah? So it's a different way of solving it. In this way, we don't need slack constraints, but by adding extra variables, which are basically our upper bound minus our variable, we can actually solve it slightly easier. So network simplex minimum cost. So we can also just apply the simplex method to a network, which is basically what we already do when we give it to a solver. So a solver will use most often the simplex method, depending on how smart it is. So if we now, for example, have a minimum cost flow. So now in this case, we have the same example. We have a flow of 10, and we want to, and these basically these numbers on the links indicate the cost for using that link. And we now want to transport 10 from one end of the park to the other with a minimum cost. So if we look at a network, we need to select n-1, so here it comes back to get basic variables linked with a positive flow. So because basically we have 7 constraints, we have 7 constraints, we have 7 nodes, and then we have the variables, so we have 12 variables. However, we replace them with upper bound, so they no longer count as constraints, and we need to select 6 basic variables with a positive flow. And we again talking about the spanning tree, also what's known as spanning. So we need to basically create a spanning tree, and we're not allowed to create any cycles. So there should be no closed loops. So, well, the rest of the flows are basic, which either means that they're 0, so there's no flow at all. But it can also mean actually that they're at their maximum flow, and we actually reverse them. So then we have the maximum flow, and we reverse it. In that case, that won't be reversed, but it will be non-basic. So, how do we select that? So, in this case, if we look at our initial solution, in this case, I just created it. And if you follow the IR tutorial with homework, it will help you through it. So in this case, what we've done is, well, again, using a similar method, we've allocated a flow of 4 here, so this is fully used, this is fully used, this is only 4. In this case, we have a flow of this is 5 out of 5, this is 4 out of 4. Oh no, this is actually no. So we have a flow of 2 here, 7 here, and 5 here. OADT has a capacity of 3, so we've added a flow here of 3. OCDT has a capacity of 4, and OBDT has a capacity of 3. So this is actually the remaining capacity. So we have 8 links. In this case, we have 8 links active. So 8 links, this could be basic, but we only require 6. Well, of course, here we have a couple of links which are fully utilized. So AD, OC, and CE. So AD is at its maximum capacity. OC is at its maximum capacity. And CE is at the maximum capacity. So we need to pick 2 of these, which we then basically make non-basic by reversing the flow. So in this case, we took an AD, we reversed the flow on that one, OC, and now what we can see is actually we end up with a minimum spanning tree connecting OA, OB, BD, DT, CE, and ET. So basically now we have a spanning tree. It's not just a minimum spanning tree, but it's a spanning tree. And now basically connected all the points within the network without creating any closed loops. And now you can see we have 7 constraints. Basically, we have 6 basic variables, and we have the rest are non-basic, or all non-basic, and these two, of course, are reversed. Now we have to go and find the optimum. So now we have an initial solution which is feasible, and now we basically have to find the optimum. So what we do now is that we look at the non-basic variables and look at the cycle which we will create. So like the subtort, we look at the cycle we will create if we close that loop. So basically what we're looking for is which link or non-basic variable should become basic. And then of course another link has to move out and become non-basic, which basically means the flow should be either 0 or the flow should be maximum and then should be reversed. So, what we do now look at all the non-basic variables, so the non-basic links here. We look at the cycle we would create if we open these. So if we look at AB here, then AB would create a cycle ABOA. Well, actually that would actually reduce the cost by -1. So actually, instead of having a cost of so redirection, so if you use AB, you actually shift the flow from OB to OA and then to B. So the total cost of that would be 4, and that would actually be 1 lower than the cost for OB. So actually modifying that flow over this cycle would actually reduce the cost by 1. Same for BC. So the same for BC. If we actually create BC, we'd actually create a flow throughout this entire network. So we get a flow BC, E, T, D, B. So we'd actually redirect the flow from here to around here. So that actually means we reduce it by 4 at 5 minus 9, and then we would actually do plus 12. So actually we get an increase in cost of 3, right? So in this case, we would reduce the flow over this. That's the total reduced cost of 9. We increase the flow over here, which is basically an increase in cost of 12. So net we would increase the cost of 3 by moving it over that cycle. Yeah. Now if you look at BE, again here where we create the cycle BE, T, D, B. So we actually reduce the flow over BD and DT, so that would be actually saving of 9. In this case, it would be an increased cost of 10, so it would increase our cost by 10. 1, sorry. So 10 minus 9 is 1. So it increases by 1, which is also what we write down here. ED, if we look at ED, then that would actually create a closed loop EDTE. So ED, what we mean, well, we get minus 7 plus 6, so we get actually a reduction of 1. And then CO shifting it from here to here, so adding a flow here would actually remove, would actually add to this flow and take away from this flow. So it would actually, so in this case also, because the flow is reduced, the cost is also reduced, so the cost is going from 4 to minus 4. So we reverse the flow, then suddenly actually increasing the flow in this direction and reducing the other direction. So instead of having a plus 4 in the other direction, we have the cost of minus 4, reducing it. And if we actually change the flow to here, we would get plus 14, and we would get plus 14, and then minus 7. So in this case, let's see, we get minus 4 plus 14, so plus 10. Minus 11 would actually get a minus 1. And if we shift flow to DA, or D to A, you see actually we have a net cost change of 0. So now basically we have our cost coefficients for shifting flows within the network. So we know if we shift a unit of flow to a certain non-basic link. So if we actually shift the flow, we know what our cost change will be. Yeah, is everyone still following this? Slightly. Okay. Again, have the flow. Maybe if you use the IR tutorial, at least now you've heard the gong, and then you'll be able to kind of go for a louder and hopefully be able to find the flavor of what we're saying in Dutch. I'm not sure what the English translation is nowadays. So, but we basically create a flow through a network. Now, if we look at changing the flow, so I'll put it at a higher level. If we change the flow, we'll see how much actually does the cost change by changing that flow per unit of flow we change. Now, because we're looking for corner point solutions and we have a basic and a non-basic variable, in this case, we take out this one, CO, so we're now actually moving a flow to this. So we're actually reversing the flow here, and that actually means that we're, by shifting the flow to this one and removing it from this path, we're actually, let's say, increasing or decreasing our cost by 1. And then how much can we change that? Well, in this case, this actually has a flow of, well, maximum change we can do is 1. So actually now we have a flow of 3 here, and we've actually added a flow of 1 here. So actually this link is now at its maximum flow. We've reversed it. So then again, we would have a closed loop here. So this now, and BD is now actually become non-basic, and OC is now actually basic. So we've shifted, like in the simplest method, we've shifted our basic and non-basic variables. Now actually we have a lower cost. So by that we've actually reduced our cost of 1 to 1. I think on the table I've actually added the total cost. So where for the first initial solution we had a cost of 144. Now we have a cost of 143.
So the minus 4 is now the maximum flow reversed, right?
Yeah, so it used to be a maximum flow, but now it's not fully maximum flow, which means it's now a basic variable. So, and the other one is actually maximum flow, so that means, well, no, it could be basic, but in this case, we've made it non-basic, so actually what we do is we reverse it. So we take the maximum as a given, like the direct connection between B and D, and we've actually reversed it, so now we have D to B being the flow, which is non-basic, which is 0.
And how is it possible then that from D to A is minus 7 while the link is 3?
Sorry, from D to A. So that was already reversed below before.
Yeah. But it used to be 3, right? So that was the maximum. How is it possible that it's minus 7 then?
No, minus 7 is the cost.
Okay.
So it's at full flow. So let's say A to D has a capacity of 3. So it's a full flow. The cost from A to D is 7. So it's at full flow. So we have a reverse flow now in place. And that of course is cost of minus 7. So if we reduce the flow from A to D, then that will reduce our cost by 7.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now for iteration 2, we now actually have recalculated this table. Well, we now have these basic variables available. AB if we make a cycle with AB, it's a cycle ABOA. Shifting it throughout to AB will then remove. So shifting flow to AB will actually move flow from OB to OA and then AB. Well, the capacity for that flow is 1. Because again, the flow from OA is a maximum, AB has a maximum of 1. So if we make AB basic and give that, in this case, a full flow, actually we can already make it non-basic and reverse flow. But if we make that, so if we shift flow to AB, then we'll reduce the flow from O to B by 1, increase the flow from O to A by 1, and then in that case, what you'll see is that actually in this case we're not shifting from one basic to another basic variable. We're actually shifting flow to AB, which has a capacity of 1, and instead of being non-basic in one direction, now it's actually non-basic in the other direction. So we've shifted now the flow is 1, and it's now still non-basic, but now it's in the other direction. So you still see we actually have the same cycles available now, which has an advantage we don't actually have to recalculate them. And AB used to have a negative cost. BA now actually, because it's reverse flow, so increasing the flow over BA will actually have a positive cost. So that's the only change. Now the only where we can shift to is ED. So ED will actually remove from this one with a cost of 7 and will increase 1 and 6. So it will actually increase the cost of 6 removed by 7. So the next effect is minus 1. Well, the maximum capacity increase there is 1 because ED will only have a capacity of 1. So if we actually shift flow to this, we create a cycle, then actually this will be a maximum flow. Well, these are still the limits, so this is the limiting one, so ED will automatically again become a non-basic. It will actually be shifted around. So again, we see that the flow is reversed, so we have a maximum flow in this direction, and then a non-basic flow in this direction. And basically this is our final solution. Now we see for all the possible, so all the non-basic variables, all the unused links, basically they have a positive cost, so there's no further possible increase or let's say decrease in our objective. So this is our minimum cost flow. And now if you have to recalculate it, then of course if you want to calculate the complete flow, we now have to revert back to the original model, so we'll have to re-reverse the flow, and then we'll end up with this model, and then we can see our total cost. So of course this delta, here we have a little cycle, so here red are just where we have the flows. So now basically the reverse flows, we now replace them with the positive flows, maximum positive flows, and we get this network here, and this gives us our total flow situation for our minimum cost. This gives us our solution. Yeah, hopefully this will slightly clear. It's the first time I tried to explain this, so hopefully it will have landed a bit. But what's important to remember here is that we have to have 6 basic links, which are basically links with the flow can actually always be 0, and we have to have the rest has to be non-basic, which either means the flow is 0 or the flow is a maximum, and we introduce a reverse flow. And we have to make sure that there's no cycles, because actually the cycles are how we determine how we change the cost by shifting the flows throughout the network. Yeah? Notice at point now, have a reread, and also in the assignment you'll be using the IOR tutorial for this, and hopefully it will become slightly more clear. And basically all we're doing here actually is applying the simplest method on a network problem. So if I would actually show you the network tableau, it would probably already be a lot clearer, but then I have almost so much slide room available. So basically what we're doing is we're applying the simplest method to the network. Something else interesting to do is if we're, for example, looking at a network, if we have an incremental cost. So if we have, for example, a flow through this network, if we have a flow of 0, of course the cost will be 0. But if we increase the flow, so if we have an increasing flow, we can actually analyze how much we can increase the flow until we actually increase the cost. So we'll see certain paths being available up to a flow of 8, and above that we need to open a new, more expensive path to actually see there that the cost will increase. So we see that for cost up to a flow of 1, basically we have a very cheap option available. The rest of the flow will be more expensive, and then if we go even above that, then there's more flow. So we can also see how the cost will vary with our flow. Well, I spoke before about my final thesis student looking at a hyperloop network. There, for example, we have to deal with adding capacity, for example, having extra tubes, having extra connections. And also there you will see that the first flow option will be cheap, and then the more capacity you will add, the more cost you will add. So you can also here look at the cost for the flow versus the amount of units you're putting through the network. Also, you can actually also use the network simplex method to calculate the maximum flow. So this was the minimum cost flow. But we can also actually look at the maximum flow. What we do in that case is we actually create an extra artificial link, so a bypass going from O to T. Well, we can basically minimize the cost by actually minimizing that bypass flow. So actually, in this case, all the links have a cost value of 0, except for the flow over AT. So we're actually trying to minimize the flow over AT and trying to put as much flow as possible over the entire network. And so, well, if we maximize the flows over OA dt, OB dt, and OC dt, so that's basically our initial solution. How much flow would we have remaining for OT? So how much do we still have to put over bypass flow? So have a look. Determine for each path what's the maximum capacity of that path, and then determine from the 20, so the total flow is 20. I think I forgot to add that. 10 maybe. Well, the maximum is 20, so remember that's 20. So what then has to go over OT if this is our solution? So it's not our maximum flow, but it's our initial solution. Okay, most of you think it's 9. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so basically OA dt basically has a maximum flow of 3, OB dt has a flow of 4, OC ET has also a maximum flow of 4. I think 4 for CE actually fell out. So we have 3 plus 4 plus 4 is 11. A total flow of 20, so it's 9 remaining. So in this case, 9 goes over on bypass flow. So again, what we can do here, well, in this case, AD, BD, and CE are actually at full capacity, OC as well. So we have to select a couple of these, which we have to make non-basic by reversing the flow to make sure we don't get a closed cycle. So now we see we have, in this case, 7 basic variables, which are the red lines available, and the blue lines are, and the black ones are non-basic. Now also here, well, which of the non-basic links has a cost of -1? So which of the non-basic links has a cost of -1? So the cost of -1 means that actually increasing the flow over that link actually will reduce the flow over the bypass flow by 1. So if adding capacity to one of these will actually, so if you look at the non-basic links, then if we have A and B, well then adding a flow here will not do anything. It will actually only change over this cycle. BC, if we change it here, it will actually remove it from here, or actually remove it from OC and add it to here. So that will not decrease the flow over OT. BE, however, if we increase the flow over BT, we'll actually create a flow in this direction, and that will actually decrease the bypass flow. So by adding flow over BE, we will actually reduce our cost by 1. And ED, ED, well, if we change it here, then that will actually just remove flow from here and add it to here. That will not decrease our flow over OT. So the correct answer is BE. Maybe it would have been nicer if I explained it before, but maybe now you pay more attention, I'm not sure. There's a bit of chicken or an egg problem in education. So BE in this case is the correct answer. So increasing the flow over BE will actually decrease the bypass flow, and that will increase the maximum capacity. So, well, if we do that, we basically now get this situation. So now CE has actually become here change. So now it's BE. We move in this case that ET is now actually non-basic. So that's actually at its maximum capacity. So this is now non-basic, and we reverse the flow. And this, and now if we look again, which of the non-basic links now actually has a cost of -1. So which of these links can we actually add capacity to, and that will basically reduce the flow of the bypass flow. So give you a second chance. So AB, BC, TE, or ED. So AB, how will that change the flow? We should add flow there. BC, what will that change? TE, what will that change? And ED. Start the timer. We'll put back the pen before I take it home. Yeah, indeed. So ED will actually create a flow like this. So adding one unit here will actually reduce the bypass flow by 1, and of course the bypass flow is going to be a cost. TE will actually have the exact opposite effect. So adding a flow from T to E, so adding a flow here, which actually reduces the flow from E to T, will actually increase the bypass flow. Yeah. So ED actually has a cost of -1. So adding a flow to ED will reduce the cost. So okay, let's do that. So now we've added the flow to ED. In this case, CE is actually now at its maximum capacity. That's the most limiting one. This is now a reduced flow. And I think in this case, actually now we have our answer again. We have our flow of 14. So there's actually 6 over a bypass flow, and the rest is actually over this flow. And this is again a maximum capacity. So this will give us our full model. Yeah. Running out of time, so just a few things to add. So I think I mentioned this before, multi-commodity flow. So in this case, we've dealt actually with a network like a water network, where it doesn't really matter what ends up where. So we have something coming in, something going out, which is true for like an electricity network or a water network or all sorts of other networks. But if you're, for example, dealing with passengers within an airline network, then you really want your baggage ending up in the same place as you do. Right, so we have each flow has a certain origin and destination, and they're marked flows. But however, they do share capacity over the link. So in this case, a link can be an airline flight between 2 connections. But we do need to make sure that we have different commodities with different requirements, and we have to really single those out. So, well, in this case, we have an example of 9 link constraints, 12 link constraints, and 24 link capacities per direction. Well, we have, so if you have actually the link in 2 ways, we have 24 links, and 12 is there in a single direction. So it means we have 12 variables per flow, 4 origins, 3 destinations. So basically we have all these are origins and destinations, and in this case we have passengers traveling between this network, and as we can analyze this. Well, why is this important? If you look actually, for the ATO students, but maybe some of the CNS have chosen the course, airline planning, they're here actually where part of the course is using an LP network to actually analyze the hub and spoke network with passengers in between them, the passenger flow. You can add flights, add planes. You basically use a network like this to analyze the most profitable network for an airline. So it's one of these applications for flows. So, well, how many variables would we need if we have 4 sources and 3 destinations per source? So if we have this network and we're not using an augmented path, we have a fully open network, then how many variables would we need to analyze a situation like this? Running out of time, so I'll just start the timer. Yeah. So in this case, we have basically 12 different flows, and each flow basically has, in this case, 12 different options. So there are 12 different possible flows from each origin to each destination. You can count them all if you want. So there's basically 12 different options for each flow. We have 12 flows, so basically means we end up with 144 possibilities. Sorry, there's not 12 different flows, but there's actually 12 links. So there's actually 12 links. There's 12 flows, so there's 144 variables. So each flow, so basically our decision variable is a certain flow is using a certain link. Right? So 12 times 12, so we end up with 104 variables. And in this case, you can really see if you use the augmented path and you only use the actual new path per passenger flow, you can reduce the problem significantly. So in this case, well, this is where heuristics come into place to limit the complexity of the solving time to actually eliminate your problem. But you have to be careful because sometimes if you limit your problem size too much, you might not be able to get your overall optimal. Well, we limit the number of paths per OD. So if you use augmenting paths, in this case, we can also known as column generation. So because a variable is simplex to load into columns, what we're actually doing by creating a path is adding a variable. So in this way, by combining these, we can basically generate a path for each of the flows and create our overall model. So we can create a maximum flow per OD combination using augmented path, and then we can actually minimize the overall cost. Another option is actually a shortest path with penalty factors. So we can actually also get multiple possible paths from A to B, depending on the type of your network. Finally, something interesting also to prepare you for next week. We spoke about networks, which are clearly defined options for getting from one node to another. What if we actually have n destinations and you can go from any one point to any other point? We basically get an unbounded network. And one of the cases here, very shortly, is Sweden, which is a Swedish problem, which has like 25,000 cities. And you want to basically find a path visiting all the cities without visiting each city more than once. And what is the shortest path to actually travel throughout the country and visit each city? So known as the travel salesman problem. So you want to have a minimum distance or a minimum time. So how do you solve that? Well, this is a massively complex problem. So you can imagine the amount of variables here is enormous. You can either use a non-precise method to solve it, or you can actually go and they finally solved this in 2003 by a lot of man work, actually using a branch and bound and branch and cut algorithm. And they finally managed to solve it, and proving it's the optimum is actually through the network simplex method, a lot easier than solving it itself. But one of the big problems here is the amount of subchores. There's a small formula there. I'm not going to go to different, but if you would try to eliminate all the subchores in this case, you would really have trillions and trillions of constraints just eliminating those. So just an example of why you can't do that. Okay, so just final question. If you have 10 destinations, how many feasible solutions are there? So if you have a traveling salesman problem with 10 destinations, and how many feasible solutions do we have? How many different options are there from traveling through these 10 destinations, only visiting each of those events? So this is one of these other chanting statistics questions. We'll take a guess. So the correct answer actually is 362,880. It's actually a 10 factor. The factor would be a 10. So it's 10 times 9 to 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So that's how many possibilities there are. So that's all. Actually, divided by 2 if you actually allow for more directions, but the order is very large. So solving this is a really complex task. So it's basically factor. Okay, so that's it. I'll see you on Thursday.